This week, we want to go back to solving quadratic equations. Now, we have 4 different strategies that we want to look at this week. They are factoring, the square root property, completing the square, and the quadratic formula. Let's do a quick review of what a quadratic equation looks like. We will usually see it in this form: ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And of course, it's important to remember that a cannot equal 0, because if a equals 0, then we would have 0x squared and a linear equation. We're not talking about solving linear equations here. We want them to be quadratic equations. We've already been solving quadratic equations by factoring. And one of the important things to remember here is that your equation must equal 0. That should always be the first thing you do. Make that equation equal to 0, and then you can factor. Let's do question 1 together. We're going to subtract 3 from both sides. Remember that those steps for factoring, I don't need to see them here in your equation. You can go ahead and do that on your rough work paper. In fact, perhaps you should pause the video and try factoring by yourself. Now we can use that 0 factor theorem. So we know that each factor could equal 0. Pause your video, give the second one a try. You'll notice that rather than subtracting 12, I added 2x squared and 11x. I like my leading coefficient to be a positive number. It still works if it's negative. I think it's just easier if it's positive. Now you can go ahead and factor. I should say something here about factoring now that you've been practicing for a couple of weeks. Some of you might be interested to know that I actually don't use the method I taught you. So if you're curious about a different way to factor quadratic trinomials, you can make an appointment to see me and we'll talk about that. But now you use the 0 factor theorem and let each factor equal 0. You found, I hope, that x equals -3/2 or -4. In the next lecture, we'll look at another method for solving quadratic equations.